All right, so you're all being recorded. Welcome to my 6 Sleep Secrets class. My name is Tracy Spackman, and I'm a gentle sleep coach. I do gentle and responsive sleep coaching, and we're going to be talking about the 6 things that generally keep children and babies from sleeping. I've been doing this for 9 years, since 2011, certified since 2012, and I love to continue to educate myself on all things sleep. And people often ask me, did you do all of this sleep stuff with your own kids? And I have to say, nope, I didn't. When I was a new mom 22 years ago, I did not know about all of this stuff. And it wasn't until my youngest child was going off to school, and I thought, oh, I've been a stay-at-home mom for a really long time, done lots of little jobs on the side, but maybe I should get her a real daytime job. And but I was always worried about that because then I wouldn't be home with my kids. And I was recruited to be a sleep coach. And I thought, a sleep coach, well, what is that? I don't want to go into people's homes and help them. And they're like, oh no, you can do it all online, and you can teach parents over the phone and video chat. And oh, all right, that sounds interesting. I'm so interested in helping moms, and I love parenting. I think being a mom is one of the most important things that I'm going to do in this life. And I have 5 kids. It's pretty important to those 5 kids. And so I took the training and I became a sleep coach, and it was intense. And I learned so many things that I wish that I had known when my kids were smaller. So when people tell me about all the scenarios that they're in, I can totally relate. I have been there. I let my kids cry it out because that was recommended to me by my doctor at 3 months old. Can you believe 3 months old? I'll just let them cry it out. They don't need to eat at nighttime. That did not feel good with me. So of course I didn't do it. If your doctor tells you something that feels so wrong, listen to your parental intuition. You have that for a reason, and seek more advice elsewhere. So that's what I did. But then I ended up doing Cry It Out, and it was terrible. And I wondered, as I was learning more about sleep, was that harmful for my children because I let them do Cry It Out? And it wasn't very good at the time because I was a stay-at-home mom and I was with them all the time. Any damage that may have been caused certainly has been undone because that's how it works. But there were so many other things that I could have done that didn't need to be so harsh and so difficult. And so the style of sleep coaching that I do is very gentle, hands-on. We can't avoid crying altogether because that happens, but we want to let our babies and our children know that we're there for them, we are responding to them, and when they're going through a difficult learning process, and for some babies, sleep is a difficult learning process, you want to be there for them and help them through it so that they can continue to have a good attachment with their parents and avoid any sort of toxic stress. Toxic stress is unresponded to stress. So if your child is going through a stressful scenario, like crying, if you're not attending to them, and that happens over and over again, that is the definition of toxic stress. And some people's Cry It Out scenarios look like that. So we don't want to do anything that looks like that. Then there's learning stress. And learning stress is when the brain is, when you're trying to do something that is hard and it causes some stress, but it's manageable, there's support, and then they can learn new skills, and brain synapses are developed. And so we want to keep it as gentle as we can, and with alert temperaments that can make it difficult. So I'm going to talk with you about 6 big things to look at when you are frustrated about sleep. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Oh, and I was going to post this live on Facebook. Here, let me do that. But that'll just take me a minute to add that. My brother would be so proud of me that I'm trying to be techie. I'm gonna post this live in Sleep Sisters Get Quiet Nights. I hope you're all in that group. I love that group. I started Sleep Sisters get quite nice because I got kicked out of a couple of mom support groups for answering sleep questions, and then people hired me and then told other people about me in the group, and they thought I was soliciting. I might have been soliciting a little bit, but they thought that I'd paid them to say these nice things about me, and I totally didn't. They just did it anyway. All right, we're going live on Facebook. That's so ducky for me. Just give it a minute to boot up, and then I'll share my screen again. All right, it's live. So sharing my screen, welcome. Welcome to my Sleep Secrets class. All right, so we are going to talk about 6 things that keep your child awake. The 6 sleep secrets that you need to know before you even consider doing a sleep plan. Okay, so the first one is hunger. Can you all see that? Can you see my screen? This is working, right? I wonder if I can expand this so I can see more of you. Ah, I did it. Okay, good. All right, so hunger. When a child wakes up in the middle of the night, one of the first things that a mom will wonder is, oh, is my child hungry? Well, if your child is under 12 months, yeah, possibly your child is hungry. If your child is under 5 months, super good chance that they're waking up because they're hungry. Children need to eat multiple times throughout the night as they grow up. And you can have sleep and feedings. You don't have to stop breastfeeding or feeding your child in order to have good sleep. So let's talk about some different ages. So if your baby is under 4.5 months old, so 3 months old, 2 months old, and is waking up every 2 or 3 hours to eat, that is totally normal. That is healthy. If your baby is waking every hour to eat, that is a lot less common. There might be something else going on if a 3-month-old is still waking every hour, but a newborn waking up every hour, that could be totally normal. Really, the range of normal for children from 0 to 5 months old is so broad that there is no normal. So what is normal for one baby could be eating every 1 to 2 hours. And what is normal for another baby is sleeping through 9 hours, 10 hours without eating. Both of those are totally normal and could be healthy. So if your baby is young like that, if in doubt, feed your baby. It's not the time, the middle of the night is not the time to work on sleep skills. You want to think about that in the daytime, not in the middle of the night. So if in doubt, feed your baby. And then as your baby gets older, they should be able to do longer stretches, but every scenario is different. So a 6-month-old may be able to do a 5 or 6 hour stretch, or maybe able to do a 10 or a 12 hour stretch. 5 or 6 hours is pretty common. An 8-month-old, a lot of 8-month-olds can go all night, no problem. But then there's other 8-month-olds that still need 3 feedings in the middle of the night, or 1 feeding after 8 months old is really common. Often by the time a child is 12 months old, many babies don't need to eat in the middle of the night, but there are always going to be exceptions, and every scenario is very, very individualistic. There are a lot of factors that go into whether or not a baby needs to eat in the middle of the night. How big their stomach is, how fast their digestive system works, what kind of things that you're eating, what kind of things that they're eating, and so many more elements that are outside of my realm. So when we do sleep coaching, I try to help you figure that out. But when you're in the moment, if you wonder if your child is hungry, just feed them and think about that during the day. This is something that you want to not work on in the middle of the night. But it's one of the big things that causes a child to wake up. And so we have to look at age and what's going on and really apply the scenario to your baby. It's very individual. My doctor, when he said that my 3-month-old baby didn't need to eat in the middle of the night, that sounded crazy. It was one of those shoulds that shouldn't be said. Your baby shouldn't need to eat at 3 months in the middle of the night. I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. There's so many of these things that say you should or you shouldn't that are really inappropriate things to say. And so could my baby go 12 hours? Not my baby. There's no way that that felt appropriate. And so listen to your mother's intuition about all of that. When we do a sleep plan, we look at how many times your baby is asking to be fed in the middle of the night, and we look at their age, and we look at what type of behaviors are around that feeding request. Are they just bopping their head on against your breast because you're bed sharing? Are they waking and screaming and pulling at your shirt? Are they old enough to ask you, mama, baba, or something like that? And so there's all of these factors to look at. And then we'll make our best guess as to how many feedings your child would need in the middle of the night. And then we try it. And we do a dream feed plan in conjunction with the sleep plan. And then you're able to be consistent and still meet your baby's needs and continue to observe how your baby is responding so that we can change our response to meet how your baby's handling the gentle changes that we're making. Oh, there's something else I wanted to say about eating. Maybe it will come back to me. Okay, raise your hand if you have any questions about eating. Okay, good. We'll go on. All right, so another thing that stops babies from sleeping is going to bed too tired. So this is all about cortisol. Your body has a period of time that it can be awake. We call it the wakeful window. And then at the end of the wakeful window, there's a sleep window. So let's say your wakeful window is this long, and then this much of the wakeful window, sleep window. If you have a more alert temperamented baby, this could actually be shorter. If you have a more easy baby, this could actually be longer in the wake window. So the body will give you body language cues to let you know that your child is in their sleep window. And this is all about temperament, what those cues are. And for some babies, it's really subtle. It's so subtly that you don't notice them. And for other babies, other children, it's really obvious, their tired signs. So you want to watch your baby and look for their tired signs so that you know when they've entered their sleep window. If you're waiting for yawning and eye rubbing, that's a really common sleep cue. That could mean that their sleep cues, that their sleep window is halfway over, or it can mean that is at the end, that the yawning and eye rubbing is the end of the sleep window. And if you don't fall asleep within your sleep window, the body will produce a cortisol spike. So cortisol is that stress hormone that your body produces a spike of when you get stressed. But you have a certain level of cortisol just from being awake. So there's cortisol and melatonin. As cortisol goes down as you're going into your sleep window, melatonin goes up, and they're directly related. So if one goes down, the other one goes up, like a seesaw. And so if you get to the end of your sleep window and your melatonin is going up, your cortisol is going down, but then you're not asleep at the end of the sleep window. In order for the body to function, still being awake, it jumps up and the cortisol spikes and it pushes the melatonin down. And so then it's a burst of energy. And so sometimes it's not very fun. Your baby starts to scream and cry, or your child has a temper tantrum. But sometimes it's funny. I call it a cortisol giggler when a child gets a cortisol rush and then it just starts laughing. And just everything that you do is so hilarious that you could have a cortisol giggler. But that means that you missed the sleep window. So if that happens to you at the end of the day, you think that you see tired signs, maybe yawning and eye rubbing are what you're used to watching for, and like, oh, there's the tired sign, so let's go start the bath. And then you start the bath and getting pajamas, and your child just ramps up and gets super giggly or starts to have a temper tantrum, and then bedtime is a fight. So what happened is you started your bedtime routine too late, and you actually missed the window. Another scenario that happens all the time is parents, they misguess. They don't guess the bedtime correctly because new mom, new baby, new scenarios. And so they think that the baby's bedtime is a lot later then the baby's circadian rhythm naturally wants to go to bed. So if a baby's circadian rhythm has this sweet bedtime spot of 6 p.m., 6 p.m. is really common, but the mom is aiming for bedtime around 8, because the mom goes to bed at 10, thinks, okay, the baby goes to bed at 8. That's what they thought would be appropriate. And so by 8 o'clock, their child is frustrated and cranky. I'm like, they should be so tired. Why are they not falling asleep? That baby in that scenario has probably had 2 cortisol spikes. When you get a cortisol spike, it lasts about 45 minutes. Have you ever noticed that when you stay up late, maybe you're at a party or you have extra work to do and you get tired and then you push through and then you get that second wind? That second wind that you experience is a cortisol spike. And so when your baby gets that, it takes about 45 minutes to burn it off, and then there's another sleep window. So it's really hard to put a child to bed if you've missed the window and you're putting them to bed past their natural sleep window. They're going to have extra cortisol in their system. So really the baby's too tired. A misconception is that if you keep your baby up late, they'll have more sleep pressure and they'll be super tired and then they'll be easy to put to sleep. That does happen sometimes, but there are more factors than that when it comes to bedtime. There is definitely sleep pressure that builds up, and from the moment that you wake up, you're starting to build this slow line of sleep pressure until you get to the right time, and then you fall asleep, and then sleep pressure drops, and then in the morning it starts to go up, your sleep pressure again. So that would be sleep pressure. Makes sense, right? But then there's also cortisol. So in your circadian rhythm kind of goes like this. And so the sleep pressure and the cortisol, and the circadian rhythm needs to be down here in a sleep window when the sleep pressure is high. And so you have to take into account both of those factors. So forget about sleep pressure and just watch for tired signs and try to put your baby to bed when you're seeing those tired signs. A common way to guess what bedtime is for like a 6-month-old, if they woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 p.m. is a really common bedtime to be awake with naps for 12 hours in the daytime, and that their nap is 12 hours overnight. A lot of children under 3 years old are doing a 12-hour night. Maybe it's from 4 months to 3 years old. Just assume it's a 12-hour night, and that's 12 hours overnight with wakings to eat, depending on the age. Some babies go 12 hours overnight. Can you imagine 12 hours overnight? Their last 8 hours could be your 8 hours, and if you can match them up, then you're both sleeping really well. So going to bed too tired increases the cortisol, and it makes it really hard for that child to fall asleep, because that cortisol puts fuel in their blood and it doesn't make them feel very good, or makes them feel too good, too giggly, and then they just can't fall asleep. So you're looking for that sweet spot. 12 hours overnight is pretty common. Now for babies under 4 months old, a 12-hour night is too long. They need something a lot shorter. And so for a 3-month-old that goes to bed at 11 and wakes up at 6, that's totally normal. It's common, it's healthy. They probably have a nap in the evening. And the range of what a bedtime is really hard to predict under 4 months old, because the range of normal is so broad. But once a child is over 4 months, they're starting to do that 12 hours overnight. And at 6 months, 12 hours overnight is pretty common. But there's a really good chart in the groups, Sleep Sisters Get Quiet Nights. In the files, there's a chart from the Sleep Foundation that talks about the average amount of sleep in a 24-hour period for babies and children. And if you have a more alert child, they're probably closer to that 12 hours, but there's a big range. And so if you think that your child isn't getting enough sleep, but you wonder, how do you know if my child is getting enough sleep? How do I know if I have the right bedtime? Well, if your child's sleep is kind of outside the typical ranges that you're seeing as you're doing internet searches and looking at charts, but your child goes to sleep independently and is sleeping through the night, then you probably have nailed it, that you've got all the time right and they're getting enough sleep. Those people are probably not in this class, though. Okay, so another thing that affects sleep is this nap deprived, if they're nap deprived. I thought this picture was hilarious because this child just looks so mad to be in the grocery store cart. Did I see a hand up? You are allowed to interrupt me. E5A Academy. What is your name? That's not your name, right?
Sorry, no, it's Alla.
Oh, you're Ella. Okay, hi.
Hi, there you go. Um, what are the, like, I have to work, so my mother-in-law sometimes pushes the baby past the yawning and everything. So what can I tell her? Like, obviously, like staring at the walls, like glass, whatever, glassy look, whatever. What
Glassy eyes,
to
staring.
look for, like, before it's too late for me to grab the kid and actually put her to sleep. To watch for. I mean, right now it's like she's pretty cool. She usually starts whining when she's tired. Outside of that, like that's kind of like the first sign I would say that, like.
So whiny is first, and then staring off, glassy eyes comes second.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know like if that's consistent for all the babies, or like you just have to like figure out for your own baby. Like
You have to figure it out for your own baby, and often the staring off and glassy eyes is first. And the whiny fussy is usually a precursor to the cortisol rush, but it's very individualistic. I have seen babies that go like this with their hands, that scrunch up their face or kind of make a grimacing. Or some babies, if they're like, for toddlers, if they start to drop things or they're falling down more frequently than they were before, those are good early tired signs. And then yawning and eye rubbing are late signs. So for naps, which we're going to talk about, with naps, if you have a good idea of kind of a sample schedule for your baby's age, you then watch for the tired signs. And if you help them to fall asleep as early in the sleep window as you can identify, you're actually more likely to get a more restorative nap. So a sleep cycle for children under 18 months is often about 45 minutes. And then over 18 months, it kind of switches to more like an adult sleep cycle, which is about an hour and a half. So if you help them to fall asleep, they're more likely to get that full sleep cycle if you help them to fall asleep before they get that cortisol rush. I have heard a lot of advice saying push your baby's wakeful windows to get them longer. And I actually totally disagree with that. I think that you want to watch your baby's body language to figure out what their natural circadian rhythm is trying to tell you, where their perfect nap schedule for them is. So as you are transitioning from 3 naps to 2 naps to 1 nap, this idea of pushing the nap out causes cortisol. Cortisol kills brain cells. That sounds really dramatic. You have a lot of brain cells. You can afford to lose them. But if this was happening all the time, it's going to chip away at your potential a little bit. And so instead of pushing the nap out on purpose, watch for the child's tired signs and let the body naturally make those shifts from 3 naps to 2 naps and 2 naps to 1 nap. If you have an easy baby, they can probably handle pushing out a nap and skipping naps on purpose because they're just so easy, which is wonderful. But if you have an alert baby, it's just going to cause more meltdowns and more frustration, and they're probably more sensitive to those cortisol spikes. So as you're trying to figure out the best nap schedule, watch your child's body language to see where those slowing down, tired moments are. And if you only ever see a burst of energy to know that you missed a window and you never see those early tired signs, at least use hindsight. Oh, there's the burst of energy. I've missed the window. What time is it? How long has that child been awake? And then if you could go back in time 20 minutes, what was your child doing? Or if you go back in time 20 minutes, that's when you would want to put your child to bed. So use that information to try to get it right tomorrow. Every day is a new day to try to find the perfect nap schedule. So you screwed it up today. Okay, we'll try to get it right tomorrow. And then as you see the patterns of the different times and the different body language cues that you're looking for, you can get it right and figure out what the perfect nap schedule for your baby is. Let me give you some samples. So if you have a pen and paper and I talk about the age of your baby, you can write this down. I don't know how to draw on my screen to do a whiteboard. Maybe I'll learn how to do that for next time. But okay, let's say you have a 6-month-old baby. Because at 6 months is typically when naps really organize. So this schedule I'm going to give you may apply to a little bit younger baby, but it becomes so much more predictable and organized around 6 months. So I'll give you a 6-month schedule. So let's say a 6-month-old, I'm just going to use a lot of sixes. So if a 6-month-old wakes up at 6 a.m., 6 to 7:30 is a pretty typical wake up time, so I'll just do 6. They wake up at 6 a.m. They typically have a 2-hour wakeful window. So they're awake at 6, and then 2 hours later, they're ready for a nap. So here's like a parenting hack. Use your smart speaker, your Siri, your Alexa, your microwave timer, and set it for 1 hour and 45 minutes. So then you don't have to think about time for the first hour and 45 minutes. You just enjoy your baby. When the timer goes off, think, oh, gotta watch for tired signs. And then for the next 15 minutes, you've got eyes focus on your child and you're a sleep detective and you're trying to notice what tired signs that they have. And when you see the tired signs, go put your baby down to nap. Nurse, rock, hold, put them into bed awake, whatever works for you that keeps it low stress. And how long were they awake? How easy was it for them to fall asleep? So a 2-hour wakeful window is pretty common for 6 months. So wake up at 6, nap probably around 8, and that first nap being 1 hour, that would be 1 sleep cycle. So sleeping from 8 to 9 is pretty common. Longer is fine, 45 minutes is fine. If it's shorter, you can need more naps in that day, but you can try to get them back to sleep to get a whole sleep cycle. But as a sample schedule, wake up at 6, nap from 8 to 9, and then 2 hours later, so 11, nap from 11 to 1. So you want 1.5 hours to 2 hours, or up to 3 hours is fine too. Some people like 1.5 hours. I can't even imagine 1.5 hours. That seems so great. I only get 30-minute, 20-minute naps. Okay, we can fix that. Especially if your baby is over 6 months, we can fix that. So 11 to 1, and then 2 hours later, 3 to 4. So there's the third nap from 3 to 4. Really, although a 20-minute cat nap probably would be fine there if you got bigger naps. But as for my sample, 3 to 4, and then 2 hours later is the next sleep window, so 6 o'clock bedtime. And then 6 o'clock wake up. So 6 o'clock wake up, 8 o'clock nap, 8 to 9, 11 to 1, 3 to 4. I'm trying to do this in my head. 3 to 4, and then bedtime at 6, and then a 12-hour night back to 6, with middle of the night wakings and feedings. But the night is keep it in the dark, 12 hours overnight time. So that's like for 6 months. For under 6 months, maybe around 4 months, you may notice a 90-minute wakeful window. At 3 months, a 90-minute wakeful window. The first wakeful window could only be 1 hour. The last wakeful window could only be 1 hour. Remember, the range of normal for under 5 months is really broad. You just got to figure it out, and it's going to keep changing. Children under 5 months old, their schedule keeps changing, and their sleep ability keeps changing. Around 4.5 months, so like 16 to 18 weeks, there is a major developmental milestone, and all the things that happen development-wise up to that point are focused on so many learning aspects. The child really needs to go through those learning aspects first before that baby can learn sleep skills, self-regulation skills, self-soothing skills. And so some babies actually, it's not that they have learned how to self-soothe, but they just naturally do it. But then it changes and then they can't do it anymore. So you kind of get what you get before 4 months old. And then once you go through that milestone, it may get better or may get worse. And then you need to figure out if you need to help them to really develop sleep skills. But everything that happens in those first 4 months is so critical. They need to learn those things before they can really develop solid sleep skills. And so people always ask me, how can I set my child up for success so I don't have to do sleep coaching? You might do everything right and you'll still have to do sleep coaching because sleep for some children is just really hard to get and they need you to help them to learn it. It's like some kids learn how to ride a bike just like that. I have a son. Anything physical, he just gets it just like that. Riding a bike, riding a skateboard, driving a car, working out, like everything physical is easy for him. Not so much for some of my other kids. And so they're just different and they have different skill sets. And some babies, they just need a lot of help learning sleep skills. And so your job for those first 3 or 4 months is to focus on attachment and keeping things low stress and lots of eye contact and all of those other little natural things that happen before that. And those are actually good things to do to help with future sleep skills. So they're really good. So naps. Try to watch your baby's body language to figure out what their natural abilities are. Okay, so a 9-month-old typically is down to 2 naps. And so they're awake for 2 hours, and then they nap for an hour, and then they're awake for 3 hours, and then they nap for 2 hours, and then they're awake for 4 hours, and then they go to bed. That's pretty common for a 9-month-old. And then around 18 months, they're dropping down to 1 nap. And sometimes that happens earlier, like 15 months. So for an 18-month-old, they wake up and they're awake for about 6 hours. And then they nap for about 2 hours. Hour and a half is fine. Maybe 3 hours is also fine. So an hour and a half to 3 hours. And then they're awake for 4 hours. And then they go to bed. That's pretty common for an 18-month-old. And then when a child turns 2, oh my goodness, all bets are off. The wakeful windows for 2-year-olds the range is so broad that hopefully by the time your child is 2, you are really good at watching for tired signs and you're able to predict their schedule because it's going to change at 2 years old. And I think that a lot of the reasons that they call it the terrible twos is because everything changes and the parents can't figure it out. It's like, what happened? There's a major developmental milestone that happens at 2 years old and separation anxiety increases. And when the child is in the thick of that milestone, they're more clingy, they need more attention, give them more attention. And their sleep needs change. And you can't just assume that it's going to be the same as it was. For the last 9 months, this child has been going to bed 4 hours after their nap. What happened? Why are they cranky? Everything changes. So hopefully by then you're good at reading tired signs. The range of a wakeful window after a nap that I've noticed for 2-year-olds is between 3.5 and 6.5 hours. So that is a much bigger range than the average 4 to 5 hours, 4 hours being super common. So you have to figure out what the new normal is and then give them all that extra attention. They'll settle into their new skills and then 2 years can be wonderful. I think 2-year-olds are so cute. And then at 3 years old, there's a huge milestone again. changes again. And the separation anxiety increases again. And there's a lot of brain development. And if you have a super smart child, they may start to understand death. And then they start to apply the concept of death to their parents. And that causes them so much anxiety. Limit the news. Be really careful how you talk to that child and talk a lot about the permanence of your relationship. When you're at the store, you're still their mom. We could really get into this in the toddler class. Okay, so let's go on to, Rachel, you want to talk about nap something?
Yes, I was wondering if you could give me an example for 12 months, because I don't know if it's the same as the 9 months.
But I just skipped it, right? Because it's the same as 9 months. But at 12 months, there's a major developmental milestone again. And the pulling to stand and the learning to walk is all happening. That's huge. And there's separation anxiety that also increases at that age because of that big milestone. So lots of extra attention and the learning to walk can be challenging. But the sleep is typically the same expectations as a 9-month-old where they're awake for 2 hours and then nap for an hour or 45 minutes or longer. And then awake for 3 hours, and then nap for 1.5 to 3 hours, and then awake for 4 hours, and then bedtime. It's the same. But something that you're reminding me about, because the reason that you would ask about that is why does everything fall apart at 12 months old? Part of that 12-month milestone, that nap resistance starts to happen. And it makes you think that your child is trying to transition to one nap. This happens all the time. But it's not the transition that has started. It's just that big brain milestone that is happening. So keep offering both naps, just like you had been. And the 2 naps, they will come back if you keep offering them. Another thing that I think that throws off 12-month-olds is a lot of daycare centers want to put 12-month-olds in the toddler room who are only doing 1 nap. And for some kids, that's horrible. If you have a really alert temperament, that child really cannot handle not getting enough sleep, because it's not actually biologically normal to have only 1 nap at that age, to skip that morning nap. And a lot of babies are being forced to do that because of the daycare center that they're in. And that's unfortunate. But if you can talk to the daycare center, if that's your scenario, and ask them to keep that child in the baby room and have that nap. And if you can't, you may have about 4 to 6 months of an overtired baby. And a backup plan would be to try to get a cat nap in the car on the way home from daycare, to just give them the boost to help them make it, because they're going to be extra tired because they just haven't had enough restorative day sleep. And then as they grow into the schedule that the daycare has put on them, and then they eventually will adjust, because eventually they will turn 15 to 18 months when that nap transition typically does happen. You may know a 12-month-old that is only doing 1 nap and seems totally happy and fine. It's probably not the best for them, but I'm glad they seem happy and fine, and it probably won't have any long-term detrimental effects. And it makes you think that there's something wrong with your baby, because your baby can't do 1 nap at 12 months. So you have to not compare your baby to other babies. And if your baby does not seem fine when forced to a 1 nap schedule at 12 months, then it's not fine. And they need that extra attention. But sometimes you don't have any control over that. And this is when, as moms, we have to be so patient with everyone else around us. But if you can keep your child on 2 naps until closer to 18 months, that's going to be better for brain development, because it's going to decrease those cortisol spikes that happen when you are missing sleep windows. Did that more than answer your question, Rachel?
I think so. The only other thing I was wondering, because you said to keep offering, and she definitely has been resisting naps like hardcore, even bedtime. But do you just like continue to work through it until they fall asleep, or do you let them skip if they are fighting it? Or, I mean, if you can get them to sleep, is that the best alternative? Try
at the regular time, and still watching for tired signs. You try at the regular time, and you give it 20 minutes worth of effort. So okay. Nurse for 20 minutes, rock for 20 minutes, pat for 20 minutes, drive for 20 minutes, whatever helps. Those are all fine. Try for 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, if they're not asleep, especially if you're in that 12-month regression, let it go. And then aim for the next nap. And probably in 2 or 3 weeks, as long as you kept offering those naps for 20 minutes worth of effort, it probably will come back.
Okay, thanks.
So if you miss that window and the 20 minutes didn't work, do you wait another 2 hours or whatever, an hour and a half or 2 hours? Or
it depends on the age of your baby. If you're in that 12-month regression that Rachel is talking about, I would probably just let it go and then wait for the next nap time or the next set of tired signs. But if you're kind of outside that time, like this happens with a lot of different ages, that as you're trying to figure out naps and you try for 20 minutes and it doesn't work, a backup plan would be to try again, give it another 20 minutes worth of effort in 30 to 60 minutes. So take a 30 to 60 minute break from trying to get the nap and then try again. So one scenario that happens a lot is a mom misses the window, or maybe they're waiting for yawning and eye rubbing, but for that child, that's really the too late signs. They're on the verge of missing it and they miss it. And so then they're fighting, and then they fight that nap for an hour, and then at the end of the hour, the child falls asleep. What often happens in that scenario is that they miss the window, but they kept fighting to get the nap. And the child had a cortisol rush, and the cortisol rush lasted for 45 minutes. And then they had another sleep window, and then they fell asleep. So an hour later, they fell asleep. So what I'm suggesting is instead, if you are fighting the nap and you gave it 20 minutes worth of effort and it's not happening, it's stressful, end the nap attempt. Go do something totally different, play, interact, maybe go outside if it's not too hot, and start watching for tired signs 30 minutes later. And then when you see the next set of tired signs, when that cortisol rush is winding down, you'll see them, you'll help your child fall asleep again, give it another 20 minutes worth of effort. Hopefully you watch for earlier tired signs, and then the child will fall asleep. In both of those scenarios, the child fell asleep at the same time. But in one of them, you fought the nap for an hour and they fell asleep. The other one, you gave up after 20 minutes, played for half an hour, and then tried again and they fell asleep. So which one would you rather? I'd rather play. I'd rather have a half hour play in there than an hour fight. And this actually scenario is really common. When I talk to moms about this when we're making a sleep plan and they switch to this new idea, generally it works really well, and the stress in the house relaxes a lot. It goes away now.
And last question, at what age do they usually like lock into more or less of a schedule?
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah. So around 6 months, the naps really organize and develop. Sometimes this is the beginning of 6 months, sometimes at the end of the 6th month. And some babies, they kind of get into a good schedule around 5 months, but then it changes at 6 months. But you're just looking, if you write it down, what happens, and write down when you see those tired signs, you're looking for the patterns for your child. And that once that pattern emerges, you now know what your child's trying to tell you that their schedule is. But a 2-hour wakeful window is really common for a 6-month-old. It's like a 2-2-2-2 schedule. Have you heard about a 2-3-4 schedule? That's 2-3-4 are wakeful window hours. So awake for 2 hours, nap. Awake for 3 hours, nap. Awake for 4 hours, bedtime. And 2-3-4 often is from 9 months to 18 months. Some babies start to transition at 15 months, and then they have 2 or 3 months of transition time, and things are a little crazy. And then at 18 months, it's like 6-4, awake for 6 hours, and then nap, and then awake for 4 hours, and then bedtime. And then at 2 years old, oh my goodness, what is it? Maybe it's 6 hours awake, and then nap, and then somewhere in that 3.5 to 6 hour range. But you don't want to put your child on a schedule. These are just samples. You want to watch your child's tired signs and figure out what their body is telling you that their sample schedule is. So these are just starting places. Brittany, I see your hand.
Yeah, does the 20-minute thing work for a 2.5-year-old for nap? Because she fought her nap and then never took a nap the other day, and it was the longest day of my life.
I think that when you're working on sleep, a 20-minute limit is good for most scenarios.
Okay.
If you try for 20 minutes using crutches and you can't get them to fall asleep, then take a break. If you and then wait 30 minutes to an hour and then try again.
Okay.
That would even work for a 2-year-old. There are other aspects if this is a real struggle to look at though. If you don't have bedtime skills, that affects nap skills. So I wish I had some building blocks to show you a sample.
I have a question too.
What?
Sorry, I have a question as well.
Okay, just a minute.
My question is about a TV or having something in the room. Does that distract the child from like going to sleep as well?
Okay, I need you to say that again.
Okay, because we have a TV. If we would have a TV in the room, would that keep her from sleeping? Like knowing that there's a TV in the room?
A TV in the room can keep them from sleeping, yes.
Come here.
If a child is used to falling asleep with a TV, the TV can really interrupt the way that the brain processes sleep, and it makes it harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep with a TV. The building blocks of sleep, though, Brittany, to come back to your question is, let's say this is naps. You need to get the naps any way possible, And then this is nighttime. This is nighttime sleep. And so if you put your nighttime sleep, you can't really build on nighttime sleep unless you have naps. But that's not nap skills. That's getting them the naps any way possible. So this is the let's do it this way. This is the foundation. Get the naps any way possible. I should do this in sizes, right? Get the naps any way possible. And then work on the nights. Once you have the nap foundation, then you can work on night skills. And then once you have the night skills foundation, then you can add nap skills. So you need night naps any way possible, use crutches, watch for timing, then you work on nights, then you work on nap skills. So they kind of just build on each other. So that 20 minutes worth of effort using crutches is kind of where you begin. And then you would work on night sleep. And if you want the nap skills to improve, you need to work on night sleep. And then you can work on nap sleep. So Brittany, in your scenario, perhaps we need to look at the night sleep too in order to make the naps come together. I have seen a few scenarios where we are doing everything right for the naps. We are watching for body language. We have a good timing of the guesses. We're giving 20 minutes worth of effort and nothing works. When that happens, we have to focus on the nighttime, and then the nighttime helps the naps to come together. But you don't want to do nap training, work on nap skills until you've got night skills. A lot of people think that you do it the other way around. Nap skills first, then night skills, and that's not the way it works. It works the other way around. All right. I couldn't see who was asking me the question before, but I did hear you. Did I answer your question? With the TV? I had kind
Sorry, yes. I thought I was talking through the phone. Yes.
Your
Thank you.
Damaris.
Yes.
Is that your last name or your first name?
No, that's my first name, Damaris. I have a 2-year-old and a half-year-old daughter too, so it was good to hear about the other little toddler.
Okay, good. Good. I try to cover all ages as much as I can, and if you want to have a question specifically about the age of your baby, please raise your hand, interrupt me, because these things, they apply to all ages, and then I can be more specific about the age of the child, of the people that are in here. But being nap deprived keeps babies from sleeping at nighttime. So don't focus on how they fall asleep. Focus on reading body language, when they fall asleep, and how much naps. So for a 2-year-old, typically you want an hour and a half or longer. Max it out at 3 hours. For a 3-year-old, the range is really broad. Some 3-year-olds, we need to limit the nap to an hour, and other 3-year-olds do great with a 3-hour nap. So the range is from baby to baby. So here, this is a big one, the going down asleep. Now this is about skills and how children fall asleep. Go ahead and put your baby down asleep for naps, but for nighttime, if you're trying to work on night skills and your child is over 5 months old, 4.5 months is the earliest that I would work on it, and I don't necessarily recommend working on it on your own. If you're working with me, we can take it really slow at 4.5 months because the baby's brain is still in a very delicate learning and development phase. But over 5, over 6 months, putting them down to sleep is one of the big things that you would want to change. And so, have you ever fallen asleep in one place and then, or have you ever helped your baby fall asleep in one place and then they wake up, they're in a different place? Don't you think that would be like you falling asleep in your bed and waking up on the kitchen floor? That would be crazy. Like, why am I here on the kitchen floor? I fell asleep in my bed. So if a baby falls asleep in your arms, suckling at your breast, and then they wake up alone in the crib, they're like, what? Why am I here by myself? That would be very discombobulating for the child. So that is a big thing to change when you want to work on sleep skills. Your brain in sleep, it cycles through these different rhythms, kind of looks like this. And sleep cycles are really complicated. I don't want to get into it really deeply, but every time it cycles up, you have this partial arousal. And if you don't have sleep skills, or if something is different in your environment, you wake up completely and try to figure out what's different. So if you fell asleep being held or being nursed or with the bottle in your mouth, and then you wake up and you're in a different place, or the breast is gone or the bottle is gone, it's natural to wake up more and need to find that thing that helped you fall asleep in the first place. So whatever you have when you fall asleep affects what your baby wants when they wake up between sleep cycles, which is totally normal. It's natural, but is something that you can work on. So if you try to put your baby to bed less asleep, so you can see where they are. For some babies, that drowsy but awake idea is all you need to do. They can see where they are. You nurse them beforehand or you feed them beforehand, and then you put them in the bed and they're drowsy but awake. They see where they are when they fall asleep, and then when they wake up, they're in the same place and they feel more confident in their abilities and they can put themselves back to sleep. That applies to easy babies. If you have a more alert baby, even drowsy but awake doesn't work. They need to be totally awake, in the sleep window still, but totally awake. And they need to really go through a learning process of relaxing their body. And for some alert kids, this is really difficult. So this is where a really responsive, hands-on, lots of touch, word shushes, pickups, stay with them, helps them to fall asleep. And do they need a visual component? Is a visual component too stimulating? There's a few elements that you can look at. But how they fall asleep, being put to bed awake rather than putting down asleep, is a big piece to change to fix middle of the night wakings. But I wouldn't necessarily even consider working on that unless your baby is old enough to learn sleep skills. And so really not before 4.5 months at the earliest time. Over 6 months is a good age to work on this. If you're not coping well, then that will be a good reason to work on it. If you are coping well, your baby wakes up a couple of times, it's not a big deal, you nurse them back to sleep, then really there is no hurry to make this big change. But if you are not coping well, then this is one of the big aspects to look at. But before you would look at this, you want to look at the hunger piece and the going to bed too tired piece and the nap deprived piece. Those are things that you want to look at first. And then look at how your child falls asleep. So another big one that keeps children from sleeping well is being inconsistent. My whole life I've had people tell me, you have to be a consistent parent. I am personally constantly working on being consistent. And every time my kids are older and getting new skills and new scenarios, I have to learn to be consistent in those new scenarios all over again. But when it comes to sleep, put your baby to bed the same way every time. So if that starts with a sleep crutch, that is actually a good place to start. So if your baby wakes up a lot, look at what you're doing to help them to fall asleep and make sure you are being consistent about that. So if nursing to sleep works and you're planning on making changes but have been inconsistent, just nurse to sleep for the next 10 days. Be consistent about that. And then when you're ready to make a change, you're coming from a place of consistency. Even though it's a sleep crutch, it's a place of consistency. So that's a good place to start. If sometimes you nurse to sleep, sometimes dad rocks to sleep, sometimes you put them in the car and you drive around the neighborhood and that's how they fall asleep. Those are 3 very different ways of falling asleep. If sometimes you just let them play until you're just sitting in the living room, you watch TV and they have a bunch of toys until they fall asleep on the carpet, like the baby in that last picture with the football. Those are all different ways of falling asleep. So pick the thing that is low stress that helps your baby to fall asleep and do that consistently for 10 days so that you are in a consistent place. And then when you're ready to make a change that you know will be hard, like putting your child to bed totally awake and you know they're going to cry, be consistent about what you're doing before that. So you're coming from a place of consistency. And then as your child grows up, really pay attention to how consistent you are. If your child learns that if they ask you 20 times for something, that on the 20th time you will finally say yes because you're just so tired of them asking, you've just taught them to ask you 20 times for something that they really want. I heard this great story about this mom, and she was saying that her child asked her over and over and over again for a cookie. And she says no, and she says no, and she says no. And one time she asked her child, why do you keep asking me? I keep saying no. Why do you keep asking me? And she says, the little child says, sometimes you forget that you said no. They get that. So if you're inconsistent, your children will know and they will learn, like they're pushing your buttons, right? It's not manipulation. It looks and it feels like manipulation, but that's not what it is. They just recognize your inconsistency and they're just waiting to get to that spot where you're going to change your answer. One thing that I've tried to do as a parent, my oldest is 22 and my youngest is 13. So when they were smaller, I really didn't want a child that said no, 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 no. I didn't want that child that always said no to me. So I would find unique ways to say no. And I found that I would only use the word no if I was 100% going to stick with it. So that if I was not going to change my mind no matter what, then I would use the word no. And so whenever they asked me a question that I thought about saying no to, I would always stop and think, is there any scenario where this would change that I would change my mind instead of saying no, that it would be something else? And if I couldn't think of a scenario that would change my mind, then I would be able to say no. Otherwise, I would say something like, oh, let's talk about that, or something completely different, and make it more of a discussion, or ask me in 5 minutes, or if I needed time to think about it. But don't say no unless you're absolutely going to stick with it. This was the thing for myself to help me to learn to be consistent. And so consistency in what you do at bedtime is a big factor. Now, this last one is something that a lot of people don't consider. There could be medical issues that keep your child from sleeping. And so the first one that I'm often looking for when I'm making a sleep plan for someone is tongue tie. That is the most common medical issue that as a sleep coach I come across. And I had no tongue tie training at all when I first started being a sleep coach. Every once in a while, I would have a scenario that I couldn't fix. And that made me crazy. I'm like, we did everything right. Why is it not getting fixed? And then later, the mom would come back to me and she would tell me, I figured it out. My child has tongue tie. I'm like, what's a tongue tie? Like, what is that? And so I went and I got myself educated on tongue ties, and I learned about that. I found out that I have one myself. It's under there. I'm getting it fixed. It's like a big scar. That's the scar. So I'm about 6 days post tongue tie revision, and they lasered it. I actually had to have it twice. I'm learning so much more about tongue tie for myself. But this tongue tie in the picture is really obvious. But a tongue tie affects where the tongue sits and affects breathing. So one of the red flags that I'm looking for in a breathing issue is frequent waking. Everyone that I talk to has frequent waking. So there's all these other things that I'm trying to rule out. And I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose. I just look for red flags and help direct you to another medical professional. But tongue tie is the one that's come up the most. Other things are allergies, asthma, sleep apnea, reflux. I thought reflux would be the most common thing, but it wasn't. It was tongue tie. Other medical conditions. Some babies are really sensory sensitive, and that affects, like, they hate the sleep sack, or they have to have their feet covered, or they can't have their feet covered. All these sensory issues are things to look at. The temperament is a big thing to look at, like alert temperaments versus easy temperaments. That affects how well they learn sleep skills. And the family dynamic. What if it's a two-parent family? The parents are divorced and the child sleeps at one house sometimes, and the other house other times. That's definitely going to affect sleep. So we can talk about that. Or any emotional or anxiety or stressful scenarios. How many of you as parents are stressed right now? Yeah, COVID, that's so stressful, right? Tons of anxiety. Our children pick up on our anxieties, and that makes them feel more anxious. And so fake it till you make it. Try to be as calm as you possibly can, and try to go with the flow with all of these changes and all of the school frustrations and the virtual tech difficulties. If you can be calm and patient, that helps them be calm and patient. But sometimes it's something that you are unaware of that is causing them an issue, and you have to be the detective to figure out what is causing them anxiety. I worked with a mom whose child was always really anxious after going to their mom's day out scenario, mom's day out childcare. And so the moms would get together and the kids would go all together. And then after that, there was always trouble napping, trouble sleeping on the mom's day out days. And so I noticed that in the pattern as we were talking about when these troubles were happening. And I had her watch and so after she dropped her child off at the daycare center, to not leave, but to unobtrusively just observe what was happening. And she discovered that another child was bullying her child at this daycare center. Like, wow, well, that's stressful. We figured it out. So then she was able to make appropriate changes to take her child out of that stressful scenario, and their sleep challenges pretty quickly dissolved, and were able to figure it out. So that was an emotional stress that that child was going through that definitely affected their sleep. There was another scenario that is even more serious that I have heard about, where is this 3-year-old was put to bed, and the parents were fighting a lot and were separated. And the child heard the dad come in and have big, huge fight with the mom downstairs, and that caused him anxiety. And he went to go he got out of bed and he went to turn on the light switch. And as he turned on the light switch, something happened that made the light bulb go poof. And so the light didn't work. And the light bulb, it didn't explode or anything, but there was a pop sound, and then the light bulb stopped working. And so they were taking this child to a therapist because they could not figure out why every time they put the child to bed that he had to go turn the light switch on and off, 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 like 100 times before he would go to sleep. And they didn't know that he had gone through this experience, and then with the help of the therapist, they were able to figure this out. Emotional anxiety and stress definitely affected the sleep of this child. So these are some extra issues that we need to think outside the box and really look at the big picture to figure out what is causing your child to have sleep issues. For most of you, it's just going to be something simple like looking at environment, or adjusting the timing of the naps, or adding in some extra feedings, or reducing some feedings, or changing the timing of the bedtime, or changing how the child falls asleep, and then being responsive and supportive through that process. So I have some things coming up. I have a toddler class coming up that we're going to talk all about toddlers. It's a 3-hour workshop. I take you through the process of doing a whole sleep plan. That's coming up September 5th. And then I'm having another baby workshop. So we're going to talk about ages 5 months to 18 months with the baby one. That's September 26th. Those classes for my pandemic special are $99, and they come with a 3-hour workshop, a follow-up mini consultation with me to talk about how things are going, and you get access to my video course. So I have a whole course that talks about how to put together a sleep plan. Normally the course by itself is $100. Normally the class by itself is $100. Normally a mini consultation with me is $119, and I'm putting it all together just for $99 because we're all stressed. We can't go anywhere. Everyone needs a break. So I'm trying to give you a break, and you get all 3 of these things for $99, and those things are coming up. If you can't wait for a class, you could watch one of the recently recorded ones instead. They've all turned out really, really well with the PowerPoint and my talking head in the corner and lots of good relevant questions. So that's what's coming up. And I'm going to do this free class. I'm going to try to do it monthly online like this, so you can let your friends know that it's happening. If any of you need a free sleep assessment, I'll just talk to you on the phone for free for 15 minutes to give you some direction and help you see what you need. And if you need personalized help, you want to do a one-on-one consultation where I have you fill out a sleep history. It takes you about an hour to fill out the intake form and watch some of the video series. You get access to the course. And then I will walk you through a sleep plan face-to-face on Skype, and those are all details on my website and on the services. So thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to post this on YouTube, and let me know if you have any extra questions. Message me. And in the Sleep Sisters Get Quiet Nights Facebook group, that is a really good place to chat with each other and to tag me and ask me questions. So hopefully this was helpful. You had some aha moments, and I'll see you online.